Hey, Five Star Family. Today we're going to be talking about the four types of friction. The friction is going to eventually lead us into something important when we talk about Newton's second law with force and mass and acceleration and how outside forces are affecting that. So this will be important as a foundational idea. So here we go. First of all, if you sled down a hill, so you're at the top of the hill and you sled down the hill, we know that there's a few things going on, forces that are acting on you. First of all, the force of gravity, right, is causing you to accelerate down that hill quickly. And then once you get to the bottom of the hill, you start slowing down. Why? Because friction, the force of friction specifically, is going to start slowing you down. And we know that gravity and friction have a lot of effects on things on Earth that are moving. We're going to keep that in mind when we start talking about friction. So, what actually causes friction? Well, we know that smooth surfaces in general tend to produce less friction than rough surfaces. And that is obvious. Look at, for example, at these skiers right here that are being pulled. As we move forward, friction is working against them to slow them down. But their skis are smooth enough, a smooth surface enough, to allow them to glide on the ice so they can move farther. There's two things here, two things that affect friction. First of all, how hard do the surfaces actually push together? How much are they being forced together? And then second of all, what types of surfaces are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with really slippery ice? Are we dealing with gravel? Are we dealing with sand? So the surfaces and how hard the objects are pushing together have a huge impact on how much friction is going down. Now, friction we know is going to increase when we push hard against each other, meaning the two surfaces. So we know that there's more friction when you rub your hands together aggressively and push together versus if you rub them together lightly. We feel the heat from the friction. If we take a look at this picture again of the two skiers, we know that friction acts in the opposite direction of motion. So if we are moving forward, our friction is always moving backwards. If we are moving up, any type of friction is moving down. If we're moving to the left, any type of friction is moving to the right. It always opposes the motion. And remember, without friction, a moving object might never be able to stop. It would just keep going forever until it ran into something, which could be quite dangerous for when we're traveling. There are four main types of friction. We're going to pick them all out here and talk about them in about a few seconds. Static, sliding, rolling, and fluid. Static friction is friction that is for an object that is not moving. It's stationary. It's just sitting there. In order to get a stationary or not moving object to start moving, you actually have to give it a little extra force, a little extra push in order for it to get to start moving. In fact, static friction is the hardest or strongest or most difficult friction to overcome. You've got to overcome that inertia first and the friction to get it to move. Once it's moving, it's a lot easier, but that static friction is when an object is not moving. Take, for example, a stalled car. If a car is not moving, even if you have it in neutral, you got to give it quite a push before it starts to move. Why is that? You have to give it a force greater than the force of the static friction. So remember that. Static friction is when you're pushing on anything that isn't moving. The second type of friction is sliding friction. This makes sense. Look at this happy family sliding down a hill. It's when two solid surfaces are sliding over each other. All right? We see this all the time. Spread sand out on an icy path, and we know that that sand is going to give us a little extra friction for when we walk so we don't slip and fall. If you apply the brakes to a bicycle or a motorcycle or a car, the brakes actually squeeze on the tire to slow it down. What is that? That's sliding friction, where they're sliding past each other. Here's a bad example of sliding friction. Fall off your bike and you skin your knee. They rubbed against each other, they slid past each other. That's sliding friction. The third type of friction is rolling friction, and that's basically to do with anything that has a wheel associated with it or a ball that's rolling. Think about skateboard wheels. They are rolling on the ground, but they're experiencing friction as they roll. And think about a golf ball. A golf ball, what do I have to do? Like little pockets there. Think about a golf ball on the green after you hit it. It rolls on the ground, but there is friction between the golf ball and the grass, especially if you are hitting it into the rough like I would be. I'm not a very good golfer. What about fluid friction, the fourth and final type of friction? This has to do with anything that has an object that's solid moving through a fluid. We often have fluid friction decreased by adding oil to something to lubricate it. So we try to reduce the fluid friction. But remember, fluid friction is super easy to overcome compared to static friction. And actually rolling friction is also another easy one to overcome. I would say fluid friction and rolling friction are the two easiest to overcome, where the other two, sliding and static, are a little more difficult. But anyways, fluid friction, though easy to overcome, is still a concern. Think about engine parts in cars that we oil. You need oil to reduce the friction. That's a form of a lubricant. Riding a bike, you have the wind blowing through your hair and the wind hitting your body. That air resistance is also considered fluid friction. In fact, anything to do with air, oil, or water is considered fluid friction. Think about cyclists that are competing. When they're going super fast on their bikes, they have these helmets that are streamlined, right? They're curved off to the side so that the air can go around them. They're aerodynamic. Well, why is that? They're trying to cut down on the air resistance, which is a form of fluid friction. So we talked about 4 types of friction today and what affects friction. Remember, the two surfaces determine how much friction there is and also how much they're pushing together. And then don't forget, static, rolling, fluid, and sliding friction are the 4 types. And be able to do examples of them. Good luck.